limited screen that I can see, and I don't trust the chat. Louisa Britton, did I mention that you were here, Louisa? I hope so.
You did.
Okay. All right. Welcome all at now 7:31 for our monthly finance committee meeting. You've got my opening. So I will turn it over to Kevin for some opening remarks, sir.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you, Mr. Russo. So first, I just wanted to open up by saying how John and I had spoke at a previous board meeting about about walking the committee through the budget calendar. So I just wanted to share with the committee that our budget calendar is an addition that I want to walk you through before the meeting is over. But John, if you can start us off with the September 2023 financial report, which includes an overview of our expenses to date regarding the IT breach, as well as the anticipated cost incurred by the mandate regarding the special education legislation. John, can you take it from there?
Sure. Thank you, Kevin. Ken, could you put the first page up of that's it. Yep, thank you. So through September, 88% of our budget had been encumbered or expended. And what I've been trying to do the last few months is highlight any important things that are going on in the narrative. And of course, the first one, is the elephant in the room. It's the $3 million that we asked the City Council for in August. It was referred to an ad hoc committee, and a couple weeks ago, the committee met. I've put this on as a separate discussion item too, so we can get to that a little bit in more detail. But at the meeting this month, the committee decided to defer a decision on our request. So I'll get into that a little more at that part of the agenda. Also in there, and another agenda item for us is the insurance claim for the cyber breach. We talked about that the last 2 months. It's come up. I have some specifics. We're making a recommendation that we seek additional city resources to cover that, as well as you've heard us talk about the special education mandate that changed late this year in the governor's budget, where, as I think all of you know, had been responsible for servicing disabled youngsters from the ages of 3 right up through age 21. And that changed in June up to age 22. And I'll have some specifics on that, but that's another unanticipated cost. So I've highlighted that in the middle of the report. And I also wanted to mention where we are on the city audit. When I wrote the report, you can see there we had fulfilled, is the terminology the auditors used, 61 of the 94 requests for information. The auditors have since withdrawn a few of those. I think they felt they applied to the city, not to us. When they originally put our list together, there were many similar things that some just didn't apply to us. So where we are as of today, the number of requests is down to 85, and we've fulfilled 64 of those. That's just a little over 75%. I'm hoping we get to 80% tomorrow. We had a very good day getting documents together today. And so those will be going over right away. And there's a little summary there. We've been doing that the last couple of months. You want to move to the next page, Ken? It's still on the general fund. This is a little different look than you've gotten, and it's really because it's the month of September. And it's the usual grid that you see. Those line items are called major objects in municipal accounting verbiage. But as you can see, at the end of September, without some add there, it would have looked like we had $17 million unobligated, unexpended. And there were just a number of big things that we had not yet reserved for. Some because it's a busy month, September, we hadn't gotten to it yet. Others because they just weren't ready. But I've listed those and they're all, well, they're things you're familiar with. Sort of the biggest one is the contract with STA, our bus company. It doesn't mean that we haven't been paying our bills because there's no encumbrance. We've been paying them. We just haven't put a purchase order on the books for the rest of the year. Should an STA bill have come in, our usual internal controls would have kicked in, matching and approvals and before any checks were written. So there's that. There's also a number of special education out of district tuitions that are not projected yet for the year in the system, but we have those at 2.6, almost 2.7 million. We also have, it's probably 25 high school age students who go to the VOAG program at Chapag High School. Had it for many years. We get billed for that. We haven't set that aside yet, nor have we been billed for it, but it was a bigger item. There's some money I call it the adult ed subsidy that we provide for the adult ed program because at least their biggest grant is kind of a matching share like the security grants you've heard about. The local district has to do a certain percent, and then a lot of the state aid kicks in. We just haven't encumbered that. There's if you remember this year, the magnet school, we had to budget a subsidy for them in the school budget because the state aid wasn't what it used to be and hasn't been covering the cost the way it was. The others quickly, our electric bill, contract for nurses. Some of the nursing positions we've had to contract for. That's a real labor shortage area. Some other utilities, our liability, and a big one, the employer share of Social Security and Medicare. We hadn't put that one on. I expect all of those will be worked into the encumbrance column when you see the report next month. And that gives you a whole different picture. There's 4.2 million that's not obligated yet. And I think it's important to look at that. Some of the things, it's just not time to put them on the books. Usually, the first month or two of the year, we're trying to make sure that things are in the right line items, that we're doing what we set out to do, getting things ready for the teachers, getting their classrooms ready. And it's really not till we get further into the fall, and certainly when we start to talk about the budget, that the emphasis comes on predicting June 30th. So there's things in there. I'll give you a good example. In the spring, some of the sports programs, take over umpires, for example, there's no reason to encumber that, or referees. We've put a line in the budget. We know what we're going to spend. We would probably, sometime in the winter, begin to set aside the spring sports. So I see a hand up. Al, should I stop, or what's your?
Yeah,
Yeah.
because I'll lose my train of thought, all people. State aid isn't what it used to be for the academies. Could you give me a 10-second evaluation of that statement? And does that mean we can start putting Danbury children in these academies as well as out of district children?
Well, the state aid for the academies is on the construction and the acquisition and all of that. There was, I think we're one of 5 school districts that were given an 80% reimbursement rate for that project, maybe 2 years ago now. And the way it works, and of course, that's run by the city, and Antonio Adirola heads up the building committee. They're the ones that communicate with the state education officials, and some expenses are eligible for the 80% aid, others are not. But there has been no change in the statute that granted us 80% reimbursement on the eligible expenses, which they estimated. So from what I know, that's unchanged as far as the academies are
Okay, so
concerned.
those other expenses will come out of our bond? Or is that a question for?
They would, the 20%, yes, would come out of the bond, exactly.
Okay, they come, all right, Dan
Yep.
Garrett. All right, thank you.
Yep, sure.
Didn't want to overcomplicate it. I just wasn't sure which direction that statement was flowing from, but thank you.
Sure. Ken, do you want to go to the next page? You'll see there, those are the different line items. They make up make up the same total you saw on the previous page, and these are the line items that we regularly report on. They match your budget and all that. Ken, if you want to just scroll down the next, maybe it's the next page, you'll see, if you could stop there, some of the larger things that I talked about. See that $1,983,000 Social Security, I had mentioned that. The tutor line, that's the line that we're having trouble filling positions, tutors and paraeducators. So you can see right there, the money's still not obligated. Could you go down a little more, Ken? Some of the, yeah, right there. So there you'll see the transportation, that's the STA line item I mentioned, 5.7 plus the 1.5 million. You can see the tuition for the special ed, 2.4 million there. Right underneath that, some of the VOAG expenses. And you go down and see, you can see electric from the bottom. So those are items that I put on the earlier page, but you can see as you look at them, they're just not set aside yet. But you can also see that we've been paying them as they come in. Electric, for example, we've July, August, September. We pay the bills each month, just like a homeowner. I don't know. Do you want to scroll down again, Ken? I think that's most of it. Yeah, there's the rest. Not too many big things in there, but there, that bottom line, that's the request of the ad hoc committee, the 3,044,000. The number right above that, those were the positions we moved over into the grant, some of the grants, especially the Alliance grant this year, which went up. So that's an adjustment. Why don't you continue, Ken, down there? You'll see the usual page on the grants. A lot of those are just coming in, and what I mean is we don't put the budgets into the accounting system until we get the official award letter from the state of Connecticut. You'd like to think that they give you all the award letters in the summer, so you know whether to hire people, how many, and that kind of thing. It just doesn't work that way. We have an idea we know what we've applied for approval to be awarded. We know whether the criteria has changed from the year earlier and what they approved. We know what the grants are for. They all, for the most part, are special purpose grants, or certain things you can do and certain you can't. So we'll go ahead and, employ the people. Most of the time, it's the same people that were in the grant the year before. Alliance is a good example of that. I think it's between 40 and 45 kindergarten teachers. They've been in that grant for many years. And just because we don't have the award letter yet doesn't prevent us from, starting to do the accounting the way it should be. But I think if not by the end of October, certainly by the end of November, we'll have all of our grant award letters in, and the budget you see will be reflective of what we're going to get. You want to go down another page, Ken? Yep, and there's the totals there. School readiness is a big one. Title I, you've heard those names before. There's the magnet school grant, about a third of the way up from the bottom. Just a couple years ago, that was $1.7 million something. So you can see that's just much lower than it had been. Yeah, so that's the report. We could take some questions now, or we could, I have the three big items I think we want to kind of expand a little bit on.
Well, John, it looks like we're scored away at the moment. I mean, it's early in the budget
Right.
year, and we have, again, I realize that that $18 million is going to go down.
Mhm.
But we are on par. My question is, we are where we should be at this point?
I would say, I would put it this way, other than the two items that we're going to talk about, the plan that we laid down as the board budget is underway, the way we planned it, for
Okay.
sure.
All right, thank you.
Yep.
And the other numbers are the unfunded mandate for the 400,000 for the special needs children to age 22 and
Yeah, and
or cyber attack expenses.
I have a separate page that I think displays that a little better when we
Okay.
get
All right. Thank you. I'll take questions from the committee. Teresa?
I was just wondering, do we have a plan B if we don't get the money from the city for these the
Is that
3
it?
million requests and the unfunded requests?
Not as of yet. We're certainly been talking about it. I had expected a affirmative answer a couple weeks ago. I was surprised we didn't get it. They are reserves, educational reserves. So there isn't a plan yet.
Can we have a tentative one by the next meeting?
Yeah, I think we can talk about it. Absolutely. Yeah, there's not a lot of room in this budget.
I know,
There's a lot of-
but we've got to
yeah.
do something.
Okay. Yeah, let's
Um,
keep it on our agenda.
And Teresa, as I had indicated in our last board meeting, we will not have a choice but to come up with a plan to reduce spending in order to
Right.
fill this gap in the event the request is not honored. And so, team and I will be working on what that could look like, and happy to discuss that. We will probably need a little time to do so, but we will begin to look at what some spending reductions, and I'm not talking about staffing reductions because we can't afford to do that, but some spending reductions can look like in order to make up this gap.
Sure, thank you.
Right, but as of right now, it's my understanding that the committee should have a decision, shortly after we've done our book work for the 2 years of the whole
Well-
that we're behind, and that we actually need the money for the June payroll, teachers' payroll. and all that should be complete way before that. Is that March or April, John, when these audits should be complete?
So
Right.
there were,
And John, I'd like to clarify the payroll question as well. Because I think John, when he had indicated previously, we have balloon payments for staff, right?
Right.
And so this is just kind of a function of the finance office and the way our contracts yield at the end of the year.
Right.
And I think the point that John was making in a previous meeting, is we will be fine if you look at the way money flows until that point, and then when the balloon payments come, we would need the remainder of the reserves to meet those payroll needs. What I'm suggesting is we make sure we address this gap that Teresa is alluding to well before that. We can't afford to wait until June 30th. I'm sorry, June 1st to know whether or not we have the reserve in order to meet payroll. So we will not position the district for that one way or the other. So costs would have to be cut significantly, obviously, in order for us to realize that type of cut. And that's something I'll be working with John and the team to see how we can actually realize that gap.
and Al, I think we're certainly on the first agenda item, but the ad hoc committee,
Can you please go back to the agenda? Thank
Yeah.
you.
okay. So the ad hoc committee wanted to see several things occur first. One is probably the hardest of all, given the timing that Kevin just described. What they wanted to do was see how we did on our operating budget for the year. The implication was that maybe there'd be some budget lines that ended up favorable, that they wouldn't need to go into reserves. The timing of that, we often don't know until March or April. Well, take last year, for example, in February, we started to see the health insurance go the wrong way, but we really didn't know until later in the spring. And by then it's, there aren't many days of school left. So they want, but nevertheless, it's in their right. They wanted to see how things are going. And then the logic escapes me a little bit. They mentioned they wanted to see how the two city audits finished. The first city audit is for the year ending June of 22. That's the one I just reported on. We have a part of that requirement, the city a much bigger part. And then if that's done on schedule, then the auditors would like to start the audit for the year that ended June of 23. They'd like to start that at the end of next month. And they talked about finishing that in the middle of March. But I don't know how either of those things would affect our spending, our operating budget this year. What's going to affect our budget this year are the usual things that kind of happen. But nevertheless, the ad hoc committee said they wanted those things to happen before they reached a decision.
Right, so, John, I got a slightly different take, and
Okay.
Kate and Michelle were also in the room with me.
Yeah.
That before they wanted it, they wanted the 22 and 23 school audits, our district audits completed. And
Well,
I didn't hear that they were looking to see if we had any money left over from the 23-24 budget.
Well, there is no district audit. It's a city audit. We're part of the general fund. The one for
Right, but
now, if you're talking about,
our end of it is not complete, correct?
well,
Of the 22 audit, is
so
our
for-
checkbook balance for June 23? Or for July, till July 1/23? Or
no, that's not closed yet.
okay.
That's,
Why not?
well, we're a $200 million operation. You can't, it's not a check, really just a checkbook. There are a lot of entries and accounting. the way we do our health insurance is very, very complicated. There's billings that have to be reconciled, prior balance. It's like any other
So,
big business.
so John,
Closing
I
books.
think that
Yeah.
John, I think the question is though, when is it typically closed and why is it not closed at this point in the school year?
Yeah, so on a typical year, the year ends June 30th, and usually April or May, the auditors come in and begin to check the systems and do the sampling and see if they're reliable and see if things are going on. Then they come back the following November or December and do the audit. And that's where they put the books together for the city, which we're a big part of, do the cutoffs, make sure everything's balanced. So in a normal course of things, the June 23 would close in November of 23 or December. Now, if I could, I think maybe some of the confusion is the auditors have really three things that they're hired to do. One is to do what's called a single audit, and that's simply a report with 2 pages in it. One shows all of the state money that's come to the city and to the board, and a second page that shows all the federal money that came to the city and the board. That's item number one. Item number two is they audit our Board of Education year-end report that we make to Hartford. We have to have a report completed into them by August 31st of each year or face penalty. And if you remember, in June of 22, the auditors were still working on the year before, and they did not audit our Hartford report. So when the state of Connecticut said, hey, you got to have it audited or we're going to, there could be penalties, we went out and hired a certified auditor to audit the 22 Hartford report. So those 2 reports are done. The third thing that the auditors do is the city consolidated financial report. And that's what they're working on right now for the year that ended June of 22. We're the biggest department. We have certain authorities to spend that other departments don't, so they look for our information. Anything to have to do with the year that ended June 23 is not done.
And you say
Doesn't start.
November, the end of November, those books should be complete? That checkbook should be reconciled?
Well, that's when they would normally come in, normally.
I have Michelle had her hand up first, Teresa, then.
Yep.
Michelle?
Yeah, no, I'm just a little confused here because my take when we were all sitting there was that there's really no fixed numbers that the city council or even the Board of Education can rely on based on the figures that have been provided by the administration. I believe you attested to the error in the number of the 4.7 million, and that we all kind of came to an agreement that the best way to know where we all stand and where the budget stands is that these audits will let us know and come in right around that March 15 date, which is typically when an administration has to report to the board, the mayor, and the city council if there's going to be any cuts in labor. If a May 1st date is missed, the city and the district goes into financial crisis. That's where the issue lies. We did not know about this shortage until I believe it was reported on July 19th formally to the city council. So my understanding was that
Point
this
of
is
order,
all,
point of order, please, Michelle.
please.
My apologies to the committee. It is my responsibility to have the committee all answer questions first, then it will be open to the rest of the board. That is my mistake, my error.
Okay.
I should have addressed
Apologies.
Teresa first. So.
Okay, please
if I
do.
may-
I'm good.
Okay. Teresa?
Well, what about this year's state audit that was due end of August? Did we get that done?
No, the report was due at the end of August. We prepared it, we submitted it on time. then later the auditors are supposed to come in and audit that before the end of December. And that's not
Okay.
going to happen. They're not even going to start until late November.
Okay.
We file it and then they come
Well,
in and check it.
You were talking all about last year's August, and I just
Right.
wanted to make sure that
Yep.
we did this year's August. Thank you.
Yeah.
That's all.
Yep.
All right, my apologies, John. Please continue,
Okay.
sir.
Michelle, was there anything else before I comment?
Yes, so actually I had the question in my mind and then I just forgot it. So I'm gonna have to
I'll
raise
give you a
my
moment
hand.
to recall it. Are there any other board members that have a question on this issue? Any other committee members that have a question on this issue?
Mr. I don't have a question. I sort of want to say to John, in listening down at City Hall that night, I'm trying to understand why the committee decided that they wanted to wait until November, December to finish or making a decision whether they're going to give the board the reserve money. And I think to me, looking at this from where I've sat over the years, if my understanding is wrong, tell me. This is a Board of Education money that has gone back to the city. It's the reserve money that belongs to the Board of Ed. And I think to keep pushing it off, we're going to be into November, the holidays, Thanksgiving, and Christmas. All that's going to come up. So you're looking at the stretched out time where they're going to give you an answer in probably January. And, we know that this is a political little plot.
No,
to
wait a
do
minute. Excuse me.
or
We're gonna-
do whatever
This is
we have to do.
Madam
So,
Chair,
Wow.
excuse me.
So, John, I just want to appreciate how you answered the questions at the meeting that night. And I certainly want to say thank you.
Thank you.
Michelle, could you like to finish?
Yes, I recall the question. I thought that the reason that we had all agreed and voted on spending $100,000 so that we could get these audits done was because we internally, the district, did not have the 1,300 man hours to get the work done and completed for the city because it was holding up $500 million in bond money. And that was the reason that kind of all these numbers are in flux with the three different financial planners or analysts, directors, with the two programs being merged. There's several reasons with COVID, like there's reasons that this did not all occur. But my understanding was because we kind of had been kind of questioning the fact that it didn't look like we were going to make it to the end of the year financially. It was brought up several times by members, by city council, and then only in July. So this is my understanding. But as a group, I thought both parties and everybody kind of in the room had the same assessment, as well as yourself, John, that we needed to really get a better understanding of the numbers and that currently we could ride the storm with what we currently have and fulfill the obligations through to March. And March would allow us to really get everything kind of comes into place. So that when we're actually working on that budget, that would give us a great understanding of, where we stand. Am I wrong on that?
So I just want to interject, John, before you answer. I guess I'm concerned about the narrative from this last meeting. Our budget for the 23-24 school year, meaning this year right now, from August to June 30th, is the budget that we presented last year, right? And so what
Of the
we
150, of the 150, that was the ask. That's the number you're talking about, right? 150
correct.
million. Okay,
Correct.
Thank you.
Michelle, I have a
And then
committee.
as part of that ask, prior to the end of last school year, we did not make the board aware of this in July. We made the board aware of this first to the finance committee, making a request for the reserves. And if the committee recalls, we had the board's approval. We can't go to the city and ask for reserves without the board approval. And so first we had the board's approval first
Right.
and made the board aware of the request for the reserves.
Right.
And then it was heard, and then it was actually heard over the summer. But you know, to no avail, of course, and we're still here now, which we, you know, and then certainly you know, the council has its right to ask us questions and ask clarifying
Right.
questions, and that's kind of where we are now. But I just want to clarify, we didn't make the board aware in July. We made the board aware, I believe it was in May, and we got the board's approval for the request for the reserves.
I guess,
So that, and that's where we are right now.
I guess what I meant was that that is when we found out publicly,
Wait a minute.
right?
Point of order, we can't keep jumping in here.
Sorry,
Please,
I thought it was a
Please,
conversation.
no, it was done. Also, at the last ad hoc meeting, the point was not made to the committee that that it was reserved money and why the money was returned because of, it was not spent during COVID. And there was several other comments that were made during that meeting also. Louisa Britton, you are a member of this finance committee? You have your hand up.
Thank you,
Please.
Al. Okay, so I was not able to attend the ad hoc that evening, so I'm a bit confused with all of this. So, John, can you please explain to me where the line is that divides our responsibility to, you know, with this shortfall, the city's responsibility, the where these audits are falling into this, because this is all new to me as well. But, you know, we have our responsibility to fund our budget. So
Mhm.
where is that red line, and what's ours, what's theirs, and why is this gotten all mixed together like it has?
I think you're muted, John.
Despite the fact that there are reserves for educational purposes and the city finance director reported those are at a level of $8.5 million that night. Even though they're earmarked for education, they can only be released by the city council. They're the ones who've reserved them. It's their balance sheet. Board of Ed doesn't have a balance sheet where those reserves are parked. So and it's well within their rights to establish procedures and methods and approvals on releasing those reserves. But they cannot be used for any other purpose other than educational reasons. And that's where you start to have the discussion. What I think was going on and what was mentioned, it goes back to April when we were in front of the ad hoc committee on our budget. And if you remember, we tried to present a budget message that was very different than they had seen in previous years. We had a book that tried to focus on the big items, the financial cliffs, some of the enrollment increases, and things of that nature. And what we heard was that that wasn't good enough, that they would have preferred traditional line item, line by line, school by school data. And we then provided that the following week to them. But when you heard the comment, we don't know what the money's being spent on, that's what they were talking about. Talking about that the book
Bless you.
itself being summarized. Now, when one of the council members at the end of the meeting started to express his views that the 4.7 million savings was not in the book, I didn't feel that was the place to correct him. It's clearly in our book. We talked about it at the meeting, and I'm not sure why he didn't see it there. But Michelle, I did agree with the chairman is the need to provide this time around, or with our next budget, the traditional line item budgets, and that's what I said we would do on the first try. So that's where a lot of the confusion, I think, has come in place. But you also had the city council, especially the ad hoc, is not pleased that their audits were not completed on time. You know, look, there's things we have to do, and I know the previous finance director cast shade on us at a point last year, even calling it a school audit. That's just not the case. It's a city audit, and we're a part of it. But why? The reason to say we don't want to give you the money until the audits are completed baffles me. We can't spend old money anyway. The only thing we can spend is on our current year budget. So I think they were just adding some of their dissatisfaction with the whole thing. That was my takeaway anyway. Now, the red line, if there is one, our job is to present the educational needs as best we've identified it. And the city council's job is to finance it, given what they can. And they can clearly say to us, here's the level we can give you, and then we have to decide what to spend it on. So that's how I see what was happening.
Any other committee members?
Ellen?
Louisa, your hand is up, or you just never took it down?
No, I have one last question, just to, the comment you that you just made, John, about about the audits, and they're displeased about the audits. The fact that that the city is behind on the audits, is that responsibility of something we did? Is that why these audits are behind? Is it something that the board, the district, something we're doing that's holding this?
As a matter of fact, when the prior finance director made it look like we were the only ones behind, they were behind too. I'd been copied on some of the emails from the auditors to them saying, "Where's my stuff?" So it's been gone. But let me tell you the numbers as of this afternoon. I told you we've completed 75% or 64 of our 85 items. The city has only completed 33% of their 230 items. They have 153 to go. So that tells you who's the biggest part of this. It's not us. I answered it.
Thank you. Thank you.
Michelle, your hand is still up.
I will put it down. That's news to me, but I'll put that down. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Teresa?
Did they hire, they put aside $100,000 to help with the audit? Any word on that?
I know they'd been talking to Robert Half, which is a famous search firm or headhunter for accounting types. They had someone they were very high on bringing in, and they, at the last minute, found a full-time job. I know they've had people they've interested in learning more about, but I don't know where they are today. I can tell you 2 weeks ago, they hadn't found anyone yet.
So it's still on our backs for the 22 fiscal year.
Well, we have
So
21 items.
Right, so I just want to clarify if I can. So we are looking to complete 2 audits this school year. It's 21-22 and 22-23. And it's my understanding, because I asked some of the same questions that the committee is asking, and I asked John, like, and I didn't just ask him this question yesterday, but why is the city behind in the audit process? And it's my understanding it dates back to the pandemic, and the entire audit process was behind post-pandemic. And then last year being the first year post-pandemic where everything was done remotely, instead of us, right? And I'm going to put it on us as in the I with Danbury Public Schools, because I'm not familiar what happened with the city of Danbury. Um, we had a really challenging time submitting materials in this remote platform, right? And so us, along with the city, the process was just slower than it typically is. And so with Scott, who's the gentleman who facilitated the meeting regarding the audit, John, I believe it took 18 months. And this is not all because of us. It's also because the company was doing this same work with other districts and cities. And that process just for 1 year to begin to catch up took 18 months. And so Scott, when he came in to facilitate that last meeting, says, listen, I essentially need an intervention, right? Because the only way we're going to catch up is if everyone's aware, meaning, representatives of the board, representatives of the council, and that the city and the Danbury Public Schools, like the only way we're going to catch up is if we're ramping up on both sides. And so, yes, there was a request for $100,000 to bring on additional help. I think what you're hearing from John is the $100,000 wasn't for Danbury Public Schools to have additional help. The $100,000 was to help with the audit process, in which Danbury Public Schools was offered some of that money to help identify help to help get this done in a timely fashion. And so the first 21-22 audit it's projected to be completed. I think the timeline, the expectation was it would be completed by the end of November. I think there would be a little break, and then we would come back and do 22-23 school year. And so John has had and I prefer that we focus on our side of this for the audit. John has identified a number of different consultants that are able to plug some holes on a couple of different days of the week. And so some of those people are retired former finance directors. Some of them are, auditors themselves. And John has had a different kind of collection of folks coming in to help us. And I think what you're hearing from John is there are a number of more requests. There's a dashboard. And so the auditors there's 100 requests for Al Russo and I, and there's 50 requests for Teresa and John. And we have less than half of the requests from the auditors than the city of Danbury does. And I think that's what John is trying to say.
Yes.
And not only do we have significantly less requests from the auditors, we're also submitting our requests at a much faster pace than the city of Danbury. And I think that's what you're hearing from John. And so him and the team are doing everything that they can to help close the gap so that we can finish this budget. And I think what was frustrating for me to hear at the council meeting that day, this is not as if the only reason we're behind in the audit is because of Danbury Public Schools. Because if there was, we wouldn't be racing to hand over $100,000 check to fix it. Number one, I think we need to just come to grips with that. And then two, what you're hearing from John is there's so many more requests than it is for Danbury Public Schools. And yes, if we had all that information in, it would just be one actor right now who has to submit documents, but it's both of us. And we're behind because of the pandemic. And then when the auditors did come in, we ended up submitting work to the auditors in a fashion we had not ever done before, because typically auditors would come into a district, come into the city, ask for all of the books to be on the table. If there are any requests you don't have them, you would go back and go get them. They would be there probably for a couple of weeks and it would be over with. And instead it was, this different platform that we had never used before. Now that we're a heck of a lot more facile with the system, we're able to start submitting these documents in a timely fashion. And frankly, as you're hearing from John, we're doing pretty well. And I think Scott, when he meets with us again, I think he'll be reporting that.
Thank you, Mr. Super.
Thank you, Mr. Russo.
All right. Committee members. Teresa, I'm sorry. Vice Kate. Kate,
No, that's okay. Teresa can go first if she's got a
No, I
question.
was just gonna say that it was my understanding, I didn't attend the last ad hoc committee, but the one before, and the council approving the $100,000 to hire an outside accounting firm to help wrap up both the city and education budget for the fiscal year 2022. That was
Mhm.
my understanding.
Yes, if I could comment on that, and yeah, and they certainly tried to do that, but what they found after a couple weeks were that the firms that were capable, the firms that understood municipal accounting, encumbrance accounting, how to put it together, they were all flat out assigned in different customers. We did find a firm that's interested in helping us with the second part, the 23 audit. But I know Dan told me the people he talked to, they didn't have the manpower. Just the wrong time of year.
Thank you for the follow-up. That's
Kate,
all
you're
I
up
needed.
next.
to know. But
Yeah, I just want to ask a quick question here, because one of the things that came up at that ad hoc meeting was, what is this additional 3.7 million request for?
Mhm.
And I know that they specifically asked about like what line items, it would fall under. So are you going to be putting together, a budget that reflects that 153.7, which would include the 3.7 so that they can see the line items where those monies are distributed?
So when we put the budget together, the savings, if you were not assigned to the several line items that we had. It was almost a plug figure at the bottom. And so I describe it as a revenue problem. We have to pay back that plug to get to 150. Our budget doesn't balance. We plan to spend 153 and we only going to get 150. So it's not a particular line item. Now, when we put our plan together that was talked about, we would show which line items, would be reduced.
And
Okay,
Kate, if I can, and I understand what you're getting at. And I just want to clarify the ask. I think what you're hearing John say is we put together a budget that adds up to 150 million. And because we anticipated a savings, that was not included in the budget. Some of those things that we included from the cost savings, the expectation was, as an example, we were going to pre-purchase transportation. We were going to pre-purchase copy machines. We were going to pre-purchase, et cetera. And so, however, those items are not in the budget because the expectation was we were going to pre-purchase on those savings. And so now, given that we didn't realize those savings, we will, have to come up with a plan B just in case this gap is not realized as requested, and figure out what things could be cut and reduced to the number of 3.7 in the event we don't get the reserve. So we will figure out a way to find out what we will have to have less of in the event we don't get the reserves. And that's something I'll need a little time with, but that's certainly something I'll be prepared to come back to the committee and then eventually the full board.
Okay. So just so we have a sense of the timeline there, Kevin, because I think part of my concern is as we get further into the school year and more of our budget is encumbered, obviously it becomes harder for us to find those cost savings. So what do you anticipate the timeline being for getting that information in front of the board?
I anticipate we will be back in front of the board in the last board meeting in November.
Okay.
Our full budget, our regular board meeting in November. And then you'll see in our budget calendar when we get up to number 5, I think it will kind of coincide with some of our requests for the 24-25 school year budget, and make sure we have some answers to this year's budget as well to close this one out, meaning this
Okay.
$3.7 million gap.
Thank you. I
I'm going
appreciate
to
that.
need a little. I just know I'm going to need a little time to come up with a plan.
Yeah, no. I mean, I think that makes sense. I just want to make sure, especially as we start to head into budget season for next year, that we're making our lines clear where they are, especially given like the drop off of that ESSER funding and what that means in terms of a financial cliff. We really need to go into that with an accurate sort of picture of what our costs are going to be and what we're going to be faced with giving up should that initial drawdown not happen. But then also, going into that budget cycle, being able to paint a picture of, these are the dollars that we've had supplemented in our budget by federal funding that are no longer available to us. So, there's separate things that we're faced with, possibly losing because of that drop off. I don't want those two things to get confused. That's
I
really
agree.
where I'm
I
going.
totally agree. I totally agree. Which is all the more reason to bring closure to this year's budget. And so I'll start that work with John to make sure we can clarify those things for the committee and the full board.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. Thank you, Kate. Gladys, I may have inadvertently cut you off before. Did you have anything else to add?
No, my only question and final question to John is, have you received any type of communication from Mr. Lever or whoever's that ad hoc committee leader is, and I assume it's him, when we will be meeting again? Have they scheduled another meeting?
They have not.
I thought I saw something for November, John.
I did.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, I believe we have an ad hoc committee meeting in November, Gladys.
Okay,
Okay.
okay.
Michelle, did I see your
Yeah.
hand?
Yes. So John, I know that I think, what Kevin said, first of all, what Kate said, I think was spot
Mhm.
on.
Right.
And thank you for, saying it so eloquently. But I was just wondering, I know that we're all working hard and you are all, going back and forth, and we've, got 75% of what we need to provide to the city or whomever is doing the audit. But the numbers that the city is waiting on has to be provided by the Board of Ed so that they can complete that bigger scope. So although they're not as far along, we need to provide the numbers, the district, to the councils or to whomever is doing the audit so that it can get done quickly. So I think we're all working together, and it's not like one has done a little bit more or less. Everybody's working hard, but the information, that's what everybody's looking to get together. And I think everybody in that room agreed that that's what we're just looking to do so that we spend our dollars wisely and we know where they're going. That's it for
Correct.
me.
Right. So
Michelle,
what,
if I may, Michelle,
Thank you.
you're, I believe you've just confused the Board of Education with the school administration.
Well, what I'm trying to say is
Yeah.
that the district has to provide the Board of Education those numbers as well as the city council, all of them, but the district itself, without getting all of the figures together, the next 25% that are needed, are not going to allow the city to finish their part of the work that needs to be done. And that impacts the entire city as far as our bonding
Okay,
and where we are. That's what I'm
Now-
saying.
well stated.
Al, if I could just put a point on that too. What I think Michelle is talking about, we had a status update meeting with the auditors, and the partner was describing exactly that. It was about 2 weeks ago. And what they were looking for are documents known as trial balances, particularly the general fund. But we have 3 that we manage and administer. And he was right. He said without those trial balances from the school district, they couldn't go forward. Those were provided a week ago Thursday to both the city and to the auditors. So that requirement has since been met. And because it was so important.
Well, that's great to hear because I didn't hear that update. So thank you.
All right, sir. Anyone from the committee? Anyone from the committee? Any additional questions on this agenda item? From the committee first. From the committee first. Seeing none? Any other board members? Final
No.
question, this agenda item. Gladys?
No,
All right, thank you. Anyone else? Anyone else?
Michelle, I think, wants something.
Michelle?
No, I just, thank you for your
Her hand
time.
just went, her hand just went down. Okay.
Yeah, no, just thank you everyone for your time and your questions. I appreciate it, John and Kevin and Kate, you know, your depiction was great. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, thank you.
All right. So item 2 has now been complete. Item 3, the security breach issue.
Ken, could you put up the first page of that second set I sent you? There it is. Okay. And I think you saw this last month. These are the expenses we incurred relative to the breach on July 18th. And I don't expect any more, and I'll tell you why in a second, but let me just walk through them fairly quickly. The two at the top there, Surefire Cyber and Lewis Brisbois, those were two firms that our insurance company recommended we hire. The first one brought technical expertise to the situation, and the second one is a law firm with a specialty in breaches. Lewis Brisbois, they're a national law firm, and together the contracts were $83,100. And as I note there, our policy has a $100,000 deductible. So of course they came out of the deductible. Then we had some equipment that we felt we should purchase just to make us more secure than we had been. Precision is a company that works on our systems periodically, and they had to rebuild what's called our HyperFlex. I don't know, Al, do we want to mute someone here? Or?
Yeah.
Okay.
I heard
better.
chips from someone.
Okay. So they rebuilt our HyperFlex. We had to buy some storage as we were rebuilding everything, and we had backed things up off site. So we were able to bring things down onto new equipment, but the storage that was in terabytes. That's how big that was. Azure were some protective licensing for our Windows machines and those that use Microsoft. We needed to get some new licenses there, which we did. And Sentinel-1, that, by the way, is what we were, that was the follow-up question from last time. It took me a while to answer, but that's a monitoring piece of software that went on all of our workstations that constantly looks for things that might be coming in or shouldn't be there. But our insurance policy does not cover equipment or software like this. So that's why I put not covered. But the last thing, the credit monitoring, and that's a requirement of companies, organizations when they're breached. You have to offer the people that may have been affected credit monitoring service. And what's happened in the last probably 3 weeks, no one has signed up for it. We had a big surge in the beginning. I think the first week there might have been 300 or 400, and then 150 after that. And it's gradually gone down. And it cost $1.80 a month. And you can see there were 10 months to go when we started it. So the math comes out to 12,000. So the whole thing adds, and that went against our deductible too. So the whole thing comes out 202,000. And what we're recommending, especially since the conversation we just had, that we seek an interim appropriation from the city in the same manner that a year ago, if you remember, when we had the problem with the high school gymnasium floor, when we had the leak, our insurance deductible there was 250,000. You made a motion to ask the city for the deductible, so that's half of what we'd be doing here, the same thing. In that case, once the city got the request, they decided it would be better coming out of our reserves, which it did, and we got the money. And that was kind of in the back of my statement earlier that, it's up to us to point out the needs and then the city decide how they're going to finance it, whether it's, surplus reserves or transfers and things like that. So we're asking you to approve a request for additional funding. Questions? Al, I think you're muted.
I'm sorry. I thought it was wise that I mute myself momentarily. Uh,
Yes,
Uh,
Al.
You're, okay, so you're looking for a recommendation from the committee tonight to bring back to the board for a full board recommendation? Is that what you're looking for?
That's
John?
correct. That would be the step.
All right, okay. Would someone like to make a motion? Teresa,
I make a motion that we approve the IT request to the full board of $202,274.
to be asked, is it from the city reserves? Is the wording need to be fine tuned a little bit, Teresa?
From the city reserves.
Do I hear a
Or-
second?
I'll second that, but just for clarification, is that from education reserves held by the city or is it from city reserves?
That would be the board of the education reserves, correct?
Correct. I just want to be clear about that. That's all.
John, can you clarify?
Yes, the city also has a surplus, and that's from where most new money comes from because, quite frankly, the other departments don't have reserves like we do. You could call it the city surplus, the community chest, the fund balance. It has different names. That's different than money, the 8.5 million that was set aside from prior school budgets into a reserve. So
In which we have access to 5 million of that, John? That
we do, right.
so
When
we don't have
Dan,
access to 8.5, we have access to a $5 million education.
yeah, well, I think what you heard from Dan Garrick that night was part of that 5 million has to be held on to because of our insurance is self-insured. It was between 2.5 and 3 million. But our calculation showed that and he agreed, that were the 3 million released, there would still be about 900,000, call it undesignated, after the release. So I think that's probably what they would look for to see if they had the money to afford this.
Okay. But that is
So
seems-
this would come from our reserves, not the city reserves.
That's
From
how I
the-
heard your recommendation, if others did. That's what I heard.
Okay,
do I hear a second? Kate, have you been clarified?
Second. Yes, thank you. Second.
Okay, motion by Teresa. Second by Kate. From the subcommittee, all in favor?
aye.
Aye.
El Russo will be the third aye.
How about Louisa?
Lisa,
Aye.
4, okay. Motion carried. Any nay, let me just, is there any nay out there that I have missed? Motion carried. All right. The finance subcommittee will bring it back to the board for the board to vote on with our recommendation that we asked the city for $202,274 out of the reserve to cover the data breach. Okay. Next item on the agenda.
Ken, could you put up the last page? Okay, I'm gonna probably need some help from the superintendent on this one, but let me just describe, I'll set the table. As I mentioned early, the mandate changed for educating special education youngsters up to age 22. We had some students last year that were 21. We were expecting to age out, if I could use that term, and now they're not. Talking with our special ed director, Kelly Truchas, what she identified as tuition expenses unanticipated of $240,000. There are two I call them type 2 mini buses. Those are special ed yellow buses for these students at a cost of $70,000 a year. And then there's some other supplies, materials, things like that. She mentioned iPads or something they use for a total of $400,000. I don't know, Kevin, is there anything you'd want to add to that, or?
Right. So first, I just want to provide a little bit more context around the legislation and the kind of spirit of the legislation, because I think the spirit of the legislation is a good one in that I'm 21 years old, and if I turn 22 on January 3rd, all of a sudden I'm plucked out of school, no longer receive services. My education has been interrupted in the middle of the school year. And so, because previously schools were only required to provide education up to the 21st birthday. So at any point during the school year when a child turned 22, they were pulled out of school. And so now we have to, at the minimum, educate them until the end of the school year. However, those costs these costs were not planned during last year for this year's budget. And so we did not account for the students remaining in out of district programming for the 23-24 school year. And so this breakdown, what you're seeing is an estimated cost of keeping those students in these out of district placements. Our out of district placements are costly. And for those of you who have been to some of our campuses, where we meet some of our more needy students and we actually keep them in district. You don't hear enough about this work with Kelly Truchas and her team and what it takes to keep students in district. But this is only a couple of students, and when they're sent out, it comes at a significant cost to the district. And so this is evidence of that. Transportation, in some cases, 1-to-1 or just 2 students on a bus with a number of different staff members it takes to help educate these children. And so those are the numbers that you see in here reflected. Kelly can certainly give a little bit additional information if necessary, short of providing any identifiable information regarding the students. Mr. Russo, I think Teresa has a hand raised. I don't know if anyone else does.
Teresa.
How many students are we talking about?
We're talking about 3 students, I believe. So that gives you an idea of what the cost is for an entire year for some of our children. John, was it 3 or 4? I believe it was.
It might have been
too.
4. I think.
Okay.
Maybe 1 not for the full year.
Okay.
Kevin, if we spend more above our allotment, what is the possibility of recovering? What do we cover? 80% above a certain number?
Great question. So there's a state aid called excess cost state aid, not to be confused with ECS, which is our general state aid for education, but it sounds like it, but it's very different. They call it excess costs. It probably should be called high cost state aid. And when you have a out of district tuition that is above a certain amount, then you get about 70 to 75% back of the incremental above that amount. The amounts vary from school to school. The way they're calculated is you take your per pupil amount which is part of that Hartford report I was talking about each August. They look at what you spend by the number of students and come up with a per pupil. We're close to $16,000. But that could be very different in Bethel, New Fairfield, and so forth. They multiply that per pupil amount times 4.5. Not sure why, but that's what they do. And in our case, they'd get a number of, say, 85,000 or something like that. Then any tuition amount above that, we get 70 to 75% back. And some of these are indeed above that. I call it a benchmark. Now, that state aid is a current year state aid. Most of them are not, they're the next year. We apply for it in both December and May, and it comes right after that. In Danbury, the city of Danbury is like most Connecticut cities and towns. About 2/3 of the Connecticut cities and towns, when that aid comes in, it goes directly to the city treasurer. It's treated like any other state aid. About 1/3 of the towns give the money to their school boards. They make them budget for that, anticipate that state aid, but both ways are acceptable. So I think if this is received favorably by you and the board, and we do go in front of the council, we'll have for them the amount of state aid that they'll get back based on this. So their net cost will be less than 400,000. But we need the 400 to get that.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for clarification, John.
Sure.
Any other committee members with questions on this issue? Any other committee members? Teresa,
What do they expect then we would get back roughly?
I didn't have a deep conversation with Kelly about what makes up the 240 and how many were above the benchmark. I could get that. I could have that estimate. Maybe if I could follow up with
Thank
the
you.
answer.
John,
Oh, sure.
John, does that mean you don't have an idea of what the number the city would receive back if they were, or if we were to pay this 400, which we have to, like what the return would be, the reimbursement would be? I think that's what I'm hearing.
I don't
Yeah.
know the breakdown of
Okay,
the students that are in the 240. Some could be
Okay,
over, some
fair
could be under.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, may I ask a clarifying question, please?
by all means, Kate.
Thank you. I just want to clarify something, John. My understanding is that when we receive those excess special ed reimbursements from the state, that those go back to the city. They do not come to the Board of Ed. Is that correct? They do not come to our district?
That's correct. I tried to say that. I probably messed it up.
I think you
Right.
did. I just wanted to clarify that, though. Because my understanding is that in previous conversations I've had with Mrs. Trucius, that number can sometimes be as much as $1 million for our district
That's
or
right.
more.
That's
Okay.
correct.
Thank you.
Any other committee member before I go to Gladys? Teresa,
So we're going to request this amount from the city reserves and not from our education reserves?
I didn't hear the motion.
the
No.
question was, the question from Teresa, I hear background. Question from Teresa was that we're gonna request this money from the city reserves, not the board of the city school district reserves? Is that your question, Teresa?
Yes.
The only comment I would make was what we did last year. We asked it from the city surplus, and it was the city officials that made the decision where it would come from.
Okay,
Oh, so
It-
it's, okay, so we're leaving it up to them, but they would, whatever the case is, and we applied for state refund, it would go directly to the city.
Correct.
Thank you.
Any other committee members? Committee member? Gladys, your hand up now.
My question being, we all that have been on the board a long time or knows that, out of district placement is very expensive to the district. My question, I think I maybe asked this last year, is say we have 6 students that we have placed out of district. Is there any point within a year's time that some of those students, say maybe 3 or maybe might be 2, will not have to be placed out of district again? And is there any type of savings for us as a board? And John, you might not know that, but if go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, I can comment on the state aid piece. And then maybe the superintendent could comment on our objectives and things. But that's why the state aid is done twice a year. In December, you put in a claim that says what you've spent so far and what you expect to spend the next 6 months. Then it's either late May or early June. I think late May, you put in what your final cost actually was. And that could involve both. If you had a student who was outplaced for half a year and then placed back for half a year, and those 2 component pieces add up over the benchmark, you're going to be aided on that. It doesn't have to be the same thing all year,
Okay.
and you can move students. So, but on how often we do it, I'll let Mr. Walston talk about that.
Thank you, John.
Any other questions?
And Ms. Cooper, to your question about, the possibility of bringing students back into district and out of these out of district placements, those decisions are left up to the pupil personnel team, right? And so
Okay.
this is made up of special education teachers, mainstream teachers. So it is always our goal to make sure our kids are in a least restrictive environment. But oftentimes students only reach this most restricted environment because the team has decided that that placement is most appropriate to meet that child's educational needs. And it could be for a number of reasons. It could be for medical reasons. It could be for emotional reasons. It could be for academic and emotional reasons. It could be a number of different things. And so if the team deems it appropriate that we can meet that child's needs back here in a district, absolutely. But I'm thinking that all of the work that it takes for a student to qualify for an out-of-district placement, it's not likely we're going to have a lot of students coming back into the least restrictive environment because we just don't, in most cases, we just don't have the resources to meet the child's needs. I don't know if that helps.
Thank you, Mr. Walston. Yes, it does help. It does
Okay,
help.
no, you're welcome, Ms. Cooper.
Are we ready for a motion from the floor? You asked from the city for $400,000 from the city reserves.
So moved.
Okay. Do I hear a second?
Second?
A second by Teresa.
No, that was Louisa.
I was Louisa. Second, my apologies. Your hand's been.
I know, sorry.
I caught you yawning. Did you catch me?
I'm Lebanese, I use my hands.
All right, a second by Louisa. All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. So I have Teresa, we have Kate, we have Louisa, and we have Al. 4 ayes for the motion to bring that back to the school board. Excuse me, the full board. All right. Motion is carried. I can't see the agenda. Do we have anything else, Kevin? The spend down or the budget?
Yes, there is one more item, and that is the budget calendar. Ken is going to, he's just set it up so I can share my screen.
Oh,
And
well,
I
real
will-
quick, excuse me for interrupting.
Yes,
The
sure.
motion was to give the 400 from the education reserve
The city reserve.
or city reserves?
Take it back to the full board. Correct me if I'm wrong, Kate. The motion will be to take this take it back to for the full board to vote on getting that allocation, that needed money from the city reserve.
From the city reserves, okay.
Since any,
Thank you, I'm sorry.
since any excess money will be going back directly to the city.
Thank you. I'm sorry, Kevin. I'm sorry.
No, not a problem at all.
Okay.
Before we end, I know we have another item, but I want to thank you all for maintaining your attentions to these issues at this late hour. All right. Okay, Kevin, item number 5.
Okay. Here we go. Thank you, Ken. And so just want to remind the board, we are to submit our budget request, the board's adopted budget, and shared with the mayor's office and the council's office by Wednesday, February 14th. Our hope is to have this in front of the board and adopted no later than January 31st, which is our last board meeting of the month. And I just wanted to review the budget calendar with you with an effort to start a little bit earlier so that this board, as currently constituted, has an opportunity to get an idea of what the requests are going to be for 24-25. We understand that we will not have any board meetings in December. Nonetheless, you will see significant activity from my office and the finance office, nonetheless, particularly with our community. And, we'll certainly cover that. John and I will cover that in our community relations meeting at our November meeting. And so I just wanted to walk the committee through the calendar for this year. You will see, starting with September 6th, a lot of things are already in motion. And so if you don't mind, I can go through this and then circle back with any questions that you might have. Our capital budget preliminary discussion. And oftentimes I know there are questions about the difference between capital budget items and items that we handle as a district. And so any big budget items that the city of Danbury would be taking on, we have discussions with them this time of year. And then they would build our capital projects within their budget. And I'm not talking about specifically things that would be discussed as part of the bonding effort, but just their annual capital budget items. And so there will be a discussion through sites and facilities later on in the process. But the important thing is, and as you see here, it's beginning to have those preliminary discussions now. September 11th, the cabinet and I began to talk about the budget calendar itself and trying to map out a plan to make sure that the board is well positioned to make a recommendation and have an approval by the end of January. And then you'll see here, September 27th, the budget calendar discussed with the board. And at that meeting, I just gave an update that I will be sharing sooner rather than later, a calendar, which is what's happening now. October 3rd, I reviewed kind of an overview of the plan with the admin council. That means all of our administrators, because there's significant action that has taken place currently, in which our chief of schools will be meeting with our principals, K-5 across the system, also be meeting with our middle school principals. And shortly before this month is over, our assistant superintendent will also be meeting with Principal Donovan and our athletic director. And so that's what's happening. We gave this overview at October 3rd about actions or activity it should anticipate. And you'll see here at the bottom, something that we did for every school in a district is provided an enrollment forecast as well on our documents. And John, can you confirm, have the principals already received their enrollment forecast for 24-25, or we just have them on our side right now?
They have. They received them at the admin council meeting.
Okay. All right. Thank you. And then for, which is kind of where we are right now, October 26th through the 27th, which is really the remainder of this month. And you'll see significant activity that's happening now, and the people who are kind of responsible in terms of deliverables. And so between our assistant superintendents, chief of schools, chief of operations, chief of finance. They will be meeting with principals, athletic directors, supervisors of various programs. John will be meeting with Dan. Meeting with Dan and Chip Salvestrini regarding the athletic budget, recommendations for new curriculum programming. We'll have those conversations certainly with Cara Casimiro, but prior to that, she will be meeting with her team. Staffing, supplies, equipment, operations, purchasing, etc. Mike Seelig will be having some initial discussions in his facilities meetings coming up soon, but prior to that, he will be meeting with Rich Jalbert, Rich Torres, and Gina Jasmine with those respective departments. Any minor project and special maintenance needs that we can handle on our side certainly will be discussed, and we will be asking Mike to review that with us to make sure we've kind of addressed all of the minor projects that we are aware of that we can fold into our budget request for next year. And oftentimes, and I think, and Michelle knows this very well in her role with our sites and facilities team, any routine summer projects certainly will be reviewed as part of that process. You will also later on see any staffing requests, whether it's K-5, 6, 8, or 9, 12. And so that's why those enrollment projections are so important. And so when our chief of schools and assistant superintendents are meeting with principals, they will be sitting with them regarding those requests and beginning to talk about what those staffing requests might be for the following school year. Projected out-of-district programs, enrollments, and costs for students with disabilities. And so Kelly and her team will certainly be giving us an idea of what this means for 24-25, particularly in light of the legislation. And so these things will be discussed later on at one of our committee meetings where Cara and Kelly will join us in a finance committee meeting, and you'll see later on we have a workshop where we can present so that it could be a lot of Q and opportunity for questions and answers. And so finance committee, October 17th, of course, that's tonight, reviewing the calendar. Tomorrow is our community relations meeting, and we want to start talking about some budget projections for next year, which include adult education, which is part of our, not all of it, but part of it is impacted by our general budget. And also want to have a discussion about our family liaisons as well, and the impact or non-impact on our budget for the foreseeable future. At our November meeting with sites and facilities, the expectation is Mike will be leading discussions regarding budget projections for facilities, technology, and security, and also share some feedback for enrollment expectations for 24-25. At our October 23rd cabinet meeting, we will be talking about the academies of Danbury in middle school and doing a cost analysis, which will include utilities costs, transportation, and staffing, etc. It was important, and it's highlighted also on the superintendent's goals to make sure we have a separate budget for the academies of Danbury Model and the middle school. And so I will be having those initial discussions with my team to make sure that we can have something available for the board to consider as part of the 24-25 budget request as well. We anticipate we will be working on this, from October, when this month started, through the first week of November. And our goal right now is to have a draft of the presentation to the board by 11/10 or the week of November 10th, and distribute that to the full boards so that they can have that available for our finance committee meeting on Tuesday the 14th. And so here you'll see draft budget presentation, which will include our enrollment projections and staffing requests for the subsequent for the 24-25 school year. And then you'll see facilities, projects, technology, and security. Of course, that's just kind of paraphrasing or capturing what you would have heard in committee reports. At our November 20th meeting, and I put version 1 here, anticipated that there might be some adjustments, particularly after getting some feedback from the board. And our capital budget presentation to the board, the requests to the city are due to the city planning department by the end of November. And so certainly we would have had some discussions with Antonio and his team, but we want to make sure the board is aware of those capital budget requests and share those as well particularly given, the board's activity and getting feedback from our principals and staff about, the various concerns around the community. We want to make sure we're making you aware of the requests that we're submitting to the city, and then of course the ones that we can try to handle ourselves as a district. And almost done here. And then moving on for November, capital budget due to the city planning department by the 30th. That's what I was just talking about. But really for the end of November through the month of December, and I would like to make sure we have an opportunity to talk through this through community relations. And that is the activity that you are seeing on the screen. And so, of course, talking to my admin team and walking them through what the requests are for the 24-25 school year. This is really going to be representative of discussions that they had previously with their supervisors, but then have discussions with some of our collective bargaining units, including the teachers and admin. And so John and I, we will be looking to do that in December. I have an advisory council, superintendent advisory council. I'm going to also make sure we're presenting to them. And then a number of different community groups that you also see up here to make sure that there's some opportunity for feedback and engagement with our parents about this throughout the community as well. And then in January, we will return to action. And if there are any updates to the budget presentation, we'll have, and I'm putting in here anticipating version 2 by our board meeting in January. We do have a finance committee, of course, January 16th. If the board has an appetite for an additional board workshop or workshop on this, we certainly understand. But then we have right now a committee planned for January 16th. And then, of course, for January 24th, we have an opportunity for discussion or adoption at our last board meeting in January. And if the board needs additional time, then we have a hold for a board meeting for January 31st. And in the event we need additional time, and then you'll see that here as a kind of hold for the calendar. Again, this is if the board has an appetite for a meeting or if it needs one at that time. This will give us plenty of time to make sure we realize the deadline before February 14th. And then in the remainder of the calendar, you'll see John has kind of outlined what the process then is for the city, where the city council ad hoc committee, they review the budget. The Board of Education and I are at the council meeting, typically answering questions on behalf of the 24-25 budget. And then there will be typically a vote on an adoption of the operation and capital budget in May. And then, of course, in the event the final budget that is adopted does not meet our needs, we may need some further discussion in May. And so dates to be determined certainly on that. But I just wanted to make sure I walked the board through. You're going to see an opportunity to see some requests in November before the Christmas break, the holiday break. And then, of course, we'll be back in action in January as well for additional presentations as we've typically received them. And
Teresa,
that is it from my
sorry.
side, Mr. Russo.
I'm sorry for interrupting you, Kevin.
No, I'm fine.
I see Teresa has her hand up. Teresa,
How do you determine enrollment, project enrollment figures?
Yeah, thank you for asking that. So the one of the more difficult ones to project is kindergarten. And so we really have to rely on historical numbers in addition to the demographers projections. But 1 through 12, we project, we also rely on demographers numbers, Teresa, but we also look at simple roll up. And so if we have 900 kids in grade 1, at the minimum, we are expecting 900 kids in grade 2. If we have 900 eighth graders, at the minimum, we are anticipating at least 900 new ninth graders to Danbury High School. And so when we do those projections, it's really about roll up in addition to looking at the demographers projections for the district.
Do you have any idea right now how it looks like?
Well, I can say, just kind of based on where we are right now, and hope these numbers remain stable, not because I don't want more people to come to Danbury, but because I'm worried about the resources we have already. But right now, our K-5 enrollment has stabilized these last couple of years. So if the committee recalls, we have not had requests for K-5 teachers we did not have K-5 teachers requests for last year as part of the budget. Our growth has been primarily at the secondary level, meaning middle school and high school. So the growth that I'm anticipating will continue to be starting at the high school, and the middle school is to be determined, because again, our enrollment has really stabilized at the elementary school, and because of that, from the last couple of years, it's starting to stabilize a little bit at the middle schools. But that's hard to say because we can get a spurt and over the registration, and all of a sudden we need more teachers. But hopefully that does not happen. We will have additional numbers at high school next year based on the projections, and so we're anticipating around 3,800 students at Danbury High School next year. And given the 1,000 students that are at Broadview, the 900 at Rogers Park, and the close to 750 at Westside, who is at capacity, Broadview over capacity, and we don't want Rogers Park to be at 900, but that's certainly almost 100 less than they had last year. But all of those numbers are up for the system, which means it's more numbers for Danbury High School. So our biggest growth we anticipate to be at the high school next year, and fingers crossed that it's going to stabilize at the middle, remain stabilized K-5, and hopefully stabilize at the middle school. But we shall see.
Thank you.
Thank you,
You're
sir.
welcome.
Any other committee members with questions? Committee members first, please. No other committee members? I will entertain questions from other board members that are on board tonight. Any board members with questions? No board members with any additional questions? Any final comments, Mr. Walson?
So, and thank you for the invitation, Mr. Russo. I just want to circle back and share with the board. I know we have a rocky road ahead, given our declining federal monies that will be expiring in June of 2024. The team and I will be looking to, number one, talk about all the monies that will be coming into the district. And when I say monies coming in, further clarifying what the acceleration looks like for Danbury in the 24-25 school year. Further articulating and really talking about all of our grants and making it clear to the board what revenue streams are coming in the district, what we can spend money on, what we cannot, just so that the committee and the board has a full understanding of the monies that are coming in to use as resources. As I had discussed earlier, having a detailed plan around this Plan B that Teresa was speaking to in the event we do not get the reserves as requested. So my team and I, we will be working on all of those things, coincided with our 24-25 ask. But we will make sure that we find a way to make this clear to the committee, clear to the board, in a way where our community and the board can digest this information and make sense of all of it, because there are a lot of moving parts right now. We certainly understand that.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
All right. Committee, once again, I want to thank you for your time for this late hour and your patience. It allowed me to attend a PTO meeting at King Street School, King Street PTO. If there's nothing else, I will entertain a motion to adjourn for tonight. Raise your hand, Teresa.
So moved.
I second.
Oh, thank you all. Thank you all. Kate, and with a second by Teresa. All in favor? Aye.
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 Anybody else want to stay another couple hours? I hear-